paper. So what are we talking about? The organisational information, HR, recruitment and retention, health and safety. We've got a significant health and safety paper coming today. Information.
Yeah, look, probably just on the recruitment, I'd note that expenditure is pretty well through the budget for the year at 125 of budget 140, and that reflects obviously the large increase in FTEs for the long-term plan. The bulk of that activity has now been undertaken, so we may come in slightly over budget on that, but I think we have picked it about right in terms of the required resourcing, and of course, as noted in there remains some hard to fill, hard to place roles in the organisation. That will be the case for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, in terms of recruiting, those vacancies be sent out to the PSGs for our websites. We have lots of people around the world who want to come home.
That's a good suggestion. We'll pass it on to HR. Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Page 76, the accidents in that little table there. Noticed in January they've shot up to 9, which in terms of an annual basis would be quite concerning. Is that because it's summer and everyone's outside, or that there's been general people more aware and are actually reporting incidents?
Look, it's typically when we have a lot of the outdoor work going on. We have our summer student program, and I know that there's been a number of things such as wasp stings, and so I think it does reflect the slightly expanded workforce and the larger amount of activity happening in the environment.
Any other issues there? Recruitment or retention, group information, integrated catchment management. Is that a separate section, catchment management, from integrated catchment management, or is it just?
No, that's so integrated catchment management's the group, and within the group there's the science team, and then catchment management and catchment services.
Yep. Corporate services, ICT.
I've got a question on page of the report 1783 of our documents under sustainable homes. We made a change here on septic tanks. Have we not had any applications for those?
Not as yet.
Okay, second question, double glazing. No applications for double glazing either. Okay.
And we've had quite a few inquiries, so Mark has had quite a few phone calls, but no applications as yet.
Thank you.
One of the policy questions that we'll want to bring to you in due course, probably after the end of this financial year, is whether or not you want to more greatly incentivise the uptake of these elements of sustainable homes. At the moment, they're fully cost recovered, including an interest cost and administration costs. So if there was a desire to accelerate the uptake, then you could look at interest-free loans, for example, which would obviously come at a cost to council, but that's just something to flag for the future. And this was a little bit of a wet finger in the air in terms of what would the response be like.
I get that. That's a policy discussion. Yep. My next question's on page 18 and the same thing, if that's all right with you, Chair.
Go for your life, Councillor.
I see that we've got the vehicle fleet's gone up by 10.
Yes.
58 to 68. And I just note from the HR our workforce hasn't increased by that many.
It hasn't?
Well, that's some other numbers are. So I want to know, are we increasing the vehicle fleet by more than we're increasing the staff? Is the number of vehicles we're giving to staff moving down the pay scale? What's happening here?
Yeah, so no.
Maybe what?
There has been an increase in the number of staff. What's possibly slightly misleading from the figures in terms of the staff numbers, if you've got the 2017-18 year, but that's your year end, which is kind of 30 June, and then you've got the 18-19 year, which is where we've got to. So we actually haven't increased from January 2018 only 5 roles. We've increased about 40 roles. So there has been a significant increase in the total number of staff since January last year and the present. The majority of those staff have been in operational areas. So we've had effectively a doubling in the workforce of our catchment advisory staff who are working in Wairoa and Waipawa. We've also had an increase in our regulatory area, particularly around compliance. So the short answer is that the increase in fleet reflects the increase in staff, both in terms of numbers but also in terms of their operational focus.
I knew you'd have a very good answer. I was just letting you know that I was a follow-up question, Chair, if I may. So, although it's the top of the graph says January 2018, that actually should be January 2019, should it?
Correct. Yes, both those sets of numbers are wrong. So,
and I just wanted to comment or express my concern about the lack of electric vehicles. 5 out of 58 is way too few. We need to start talking the talk. And I understand the comment about the utes being 70% of the fleet, but that still leaves 30% of the fleet that we could be considering this, and we've got way less than 10. So we've got to do something about this.
So what we're doing, obviously, is as vehicles are taken out of the fleet for having been met their useful life, we are replacing with preference to EV, and so of that 30%,
These numbers don't suggest we're doing that.
you would expect that to change upward. I think there is still an issue not only in relation to utes but also in relation to range. So vehicles that are having to do significant rural travel, we've still got a range issue. There are a number of vehicles just coming on the market right now. There is a Hyundai SUV that has a range approaching 400 kilometres. So there's we are certainly trying to add these to the fleet as we can, but because so much of our work is in the hinterland, range is also an issue as well as not having utes.
Yeah, I understand the issue, but I'm sure that we can and will do better.
We will take that feedback on board.
Councillor Bailey.
Well, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to go briefly back to page 79 and the Suitable to Burn Act, which has been created, and just wondering how that's going to be promoted amongst the, obviously, the horticulture industry.
So it has been promoted through the Hawke's Bay fruit growers and the various horticultural sort of groups that exist in the region. So it's socialised and available to them.
Excellent. Thanks, Ian.
Can I just remain on page 17 with the erosion control scheme? We've traditionally had issues with take-up of the scheme. I'm just looking at the spend to date. I understand the poles and planting being an autumn-based activity, and that's understandable. But is there a reason that the fencing uptake is not there? I would have assumed some fencing would have been done over the summer period.
Just Mr. Maxwell respond to that.
Just in regard to the erosion control scheme, I fully appreciate the autumn focus, but fencing, is that done in advance of planting and therefore we should see a higher uptake of fencing expenditure?
It's variable, but yes, generally that's what happens. There's been a lot of fencing scoped and agreed to recently. We've got 19 applications on the books being processed with a range of activities, including planting and fencing mixed into them. Fencing is certainly happening now. We have done some fencing up to this point.
So to expect those
Those numbers will increase.
increase substantially.
I understand Mr Maxwell's proposing to bring a report on the ECS to Environment Services in June, which will give a full summary of the first year of the scheme, if you like. And there's a lot in the pipeline now that will create a much more positive picture than we were able to do at the end of January.
Excellent.
Excellent.
Move
All
on.
right.
Lead us forward, Chair.
Sorry, Councillor.
Lead us forward.
Lead forward. So let's move through the balance of the report. Nothing else there for folks to consider.
I had another question on page 21,
21?
transport. We've been talking about this ticketing system for a long time now, and we now see that we've got another we start another delay. When do we expect the new ticketing system to start? Is it going to be within this generation, or are we going to have to wait another generation?
I think go live is still planned this year. I don't know whether Alan's got an update. There's nobody from the team available.
I mean, Anne is on bereavement leave. She won't be back until Thursday. I won't be bothering her until next week, but I do have some issues I want to discuss with her in order to provide some information to council, and that could be one of them, but
Okay.
not today.
We'll take that as a follow-up,
Yep.
Councillor.
All right.
My last question.
Last question,
Yeah, it's on page 32.
32.
Financial assets. The current assets. See, financial assets. We've gone down from 56 million down to 13 million. I was almost choking on my coffee at that point. And our net equity liabilities over the year appear to have shrunk until I read the notes to see that the reason for this is that we've shifted some of our cash off somewhere else. And so we put it, but it's still our cash. So why is it not in our balance sheet somewhere else on another heading? So I would have thought
Look, I think it is, Councillor. If you look at the next two lines down, you'll see the cash and cash equivalents has gone from 27 to 44 million. So there's an increase there, while the financial assets have dropped away.
fine. Is that exactly equal to each other?
No, they're not equal to each other.
The other two areas is I've put in a managed funds line just above that in the non-current assets.
Up the top, you'll see the 15 million there.
That's our
0 to 15.
At that time, what we had transferred to our fund managers. That's now the full 40 million that we had.
15 and 15 is 30.
And the other area is the loan to HBRIC, which is further down of 6.5 million. So I think
I thought it was 50 million.
it was 50, and then decided that 10 would stay with HBRIC until the transaction was finished.
Uh-huh.
And 40 would be to the managers themselves.
Okay.
To fund the port transaction.
I've got it now.
Yeah, so yeah, I think we're about 3 million down on total, which is just our normal operating flow of timing through the year.
We're down 6 million actually.
You happy with that, Councillor?
Yep.
Councillor
Thank
Bailey?
Thank you, Chair. My last questions. Page 88, I'm sure this is just a reporting thing rather than an actual activity that's been going on. Under compliance, there's only 2 issues that have been noted there. I'm sure that there's more, so that, to me, that's what's actually in the report more than anything else. Would that be a fair comment?
Look, these are just the biggest and most publicly visible. I think we can give a detailed picture in the future, so we'll indeed do that.
Yeah, because if it's simply just what's public and visible,
Yep.
then I don't think that's anywhere near good enough. So I would look forward to having a much more extensive as to the activity of the compliance team. And further down, second paragraph from the bottom, talks about compliance. The decrease in resource consents monitored is attributed to the amount of time staff have been involved in implementing IRIS and in inputting data. Yep. I can understand the involved in implementing IRIS because they're decisions around direction and everything else. I'm surprised that inputting data is a reason for a lack of resource consent monitoring, because inputting data is not a skilled role. So I'm just wondering where the thinking is behind that.
I'm not sure whether that's a reflection of the amount of time required to input data in the new system. So I know that some of the team had expressed that using the new IRA system is taking a little bit more time than what they were used to, just because they're not familiar with the new system. So I'm not sure whether that's a reflection of that or whether that is actually referring to they were inputting data into the new system.
Perhaps Malcolm can expand on that.
There has been quite a work requirement just to set up regimes that they then operate out of Iris. So a lot of the monitoring is going to be more automated when they're out in the field. Once the whole system's set up, so there's been quite a lot of time getting the data into the system more usefully. So there's just been that delay of getting Iris running, getting the regimes established.
Look, I appreciate that it takes a certain amount of time to transfer information from one system to another, whether it's a manual system or whatever, because I've been through that process myself in a number of organisations. But at the end of the day, inputting the data from one database into another is not a skilled role. And if we're using skilled people to do that instead of doing a really important role, which is resource consent monitoring, I have some concerns about that. So I'd just like to flag that.
Yeah, so look, I don't think this is a simple case of data being transferred across where that has been just that. That has been a part of the IT team that's working on it, their functions. So there's been a data haul across. As Mr. Miller points out, there's a degree of customisation and business process design that has to be done around taking that data and then putting it into a system, a set of flows in terms of the decisions that need to be taken by compliance officers on the ground, etc. So, in essence, it's a tool that needs to work for the compliance team, and so they have been heavily involved in taking it from its pretty raw state into a fully usable and deployable state. So that's where a lot of the effort has been, but I'm happy to go away and have a look at whether or not we are using the right mix of skills and our resources.
Again, it could just be a language issue.
Yep.
When I think about inputting data, it's a pretty straightforward role. Yep. So the way it's set out.
No, it's a very fair question.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Councillor Bailey. One more question before you move,
Just
Councillor.
on the same page and subject, the page 22 I'm looking at, the consents process. I mean, we now get a weekly report on consent applications, some of which are renewals, some of which are new, so forth. I like the idea of flagging, like in the last report that came through, you have a lot of like household discharge to, waste stormwater in a manner that might blah, 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 blah. And then, 3 down is like Mike Glazebrook's gigantic resource consent for water takes off the Narrower River and so forth. And it is sort of like, it is helpful to have some flagging of what are the most significant ones in the pipeline. This page 22 is a historic, I mean, it is looking backward, right? That is.
Well, certainly it's the one's
processed,
received, yeah.
It says past tense. So, I'd be curious, because I was trying to find something else the other day about Wyro, I guess it was, and was it I was confusing AFCO and the municipal sewage thing and so forth. I'd like to have a better sense of what are the major consents that are in the pipeline that are being moved through, because those are the ones that often raise, are our policies on the right track? Are we, those are the ones that raise issues, really. And it'd be good to have a clear picture of those. I know we're not supposed to get, our hands messy with them, but they do have policy implications often, and it'd be nice to know about those.
Sure, look, I'm happy to go away and see what information we can include in that regard.
There being no more questions, I wonder whether someone could move the report.
I'll move the report.
Councillor Barker, and seconded Councillor Bailey. Any comment from you, Councillor Barker?
Just to simply say, excellent, good start. I look forward to receiving these and over time, and I'm sure they'll get better and better.
Councillor Bailey?
Yeah, I concur with Councillor Barker's comments that I think it's a great start, and I think it's moving forward. It's going to be an excellent report, not only for councillors to get their handle on what this organisation is doing on a regular basis, but also the public. I think it's easily digestible for the public as to where we are, and in the interest of transparency, I think it's a good step forward.
Any other comment from the committee? And just one from myself. In terms of reporting this back to council, I wonder whether some notes can be made as to the time frame that the quarterly reporting, any other features that we want to see installed in the process. So it's useful. Any last comment, Councillor Barker? No. I'll put the motion that receive the report. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. It's carried. Councillors, we've got 25 minutes now to do the rest of the agenda. Thank you for all those staff that have stuck with us throughout. If we can now move to the report and recommendations of the Finance, Audit and Risk Subcommittee, and you'll find that on page 9 of your agenda. And I'm assuming, do you want to take us through this?
Sure, can do. I can just take questions. I'll just quickly cover what was reviewed in the meeting. So we had our first meeting of the Finance, Audit and Risk Subcommittee. Our new independent member joined us for their first meeting, Rebecca Dinwoody. We covered the risk management report, and there's some notes in regards to some of the movements there. We noted the proposed scope for the follow-up water management internal report, and that was to bring forward an additional piece of internal audit work in replace of review of the business continuity plan, which its staff are reviewing internally. So that piece of work's been pushed out and replaced with a follow-up of the water management internal audit. We had presented to us the data analytics internal audit report, which was really encouraging in terms of a significant reduction in the number of issues or items reported through the data analytics report, which really demonstrated really good progress has been made in regards to some of the internal controls and processes within the finance team. So that was very pleasing. There's a paper on the agenda today in regards to financial delegations, so we'll address that separately. We reviewed the Audit New Zealand management report in terms of the 2017-18 audit. Number of items there which are outlined in terms of the qualified audit opinion that was received, and I think it's worth noting that a number of these items have since been concluded or resolved, and so we should be expecting not to see those appear on this year's audit, which is pleasing. There's a note there in terms of the inconsistencies identified in relation to contract management within the organisation. So we had a fairly robust discussion around contract management and its importance. That internally we are focusing quite a lot of priority within the client services team currently in regards to reviewing the contract management system and the policy. So that is underway, and we'll be reporting that back to the Finance, Audit and Risk Subcommittee in terms of the progress there. That's probably most of the items worth noting. Unless there are any questions, I'm happy to take.
The Treasurer report, that was essentially the first Treasurer report produced with the policy procedures around it. Have any comment on where we're progressing with Treasury?
So I guess fairly early stages in terms of the Treasury reporting. So the funds have now been placed in the diversified investment portfolio. So the Treasury reporting around our financial management of investments will continue to develop over the next few quarters. And in regards to that, obviously our cash holdings have decreased and we have less flexibility around our available cash on hand. So our management around borrowing and I think our cash management will be of significant focus to the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee over the next coming quarters.
Thank you, Jess. Are there any questions from anyone on the Finance, Audit and Risk report? We sadly missed Councillor Barker, and we fully expect you to be at the next meeting in full
Could I
force.
please respond to that?
Yes.
And to make it clear that the MARA committee and this committee had their meetings scheduled at the same time. I can do many things, but I can't be out at Marae and here for a meeting. And I thought this was a poor piece of organisation. I don't know any other occasion when we've had two committee meetings scheduled for the same time at different places. So it just made it impossible for me to attend. So I'd hope that the Chief Executive will have a thorough investigation of this, determine what the cause was and make sure that it never happens again.
It has occurred, Councillor.
Thank you.
So, Councillor Belford.
Yeah, are we satisfied that we have enough audits underway?
Says facetiously.
We don't need any more audits.
Possibly suffering from audit fatigue a little.
Councillor Wilson.
Sort of a adjunct to that, I mean, you know, you do have a lot of work underway, but, and I'm looking for it here, and it won't be in here probably, but what are we doing to make sure we're cyber safe? There's a huge increase in big data organisations being targeted by all sorts of people, and I'm not saying that, you know, the Russians would be particularly interested in what we're doing here to assist or otherwise POTUS in the next election, but in reality it's beyond, it's more prevalent than we realise. That's the work I see happening around the place. Just not so much, I don't want a full line item on what we're doing about it, but I just want some reassurance that actually through the gambits of this committee we are looking at that sort of stuff and working up a project or projects to deal with things such as cybersecurity, which we would not normally see. So.
Yeah, so it's certainly on the risk register, and we did actually have a discussion around that particular issue at the Finance, Audit and Risk Committee, and it's something that I talk with my IT manager about on a regular basis. So there is currently some training for staff, some phishing training around sort of scam emails and just things to be on the alert for, but it is something that is on a regular basis discussed at the IT level with the management team.
It would appear we're one of the most gullible, ripped-off nations in the world almost. We're far too trusting, so I'm pleased to hear that.
Any other comment before I get to Councillor Bailey to move the recommendation?
I'm happy to move the recommendation, Mr. Chair.
I'll second because I was there.
Ouch.
Not intended, Councillor. I fully appreciate your position.
I'd like to thank you, Chair. Again, it was a great meeting of the Finance, Audit and Risk Subcommittee.
All-powerful committee.
Sorry?
All-powerful.
All-powerful, yep. But I'd just like to point out and thank the staff for the IRIS system implementation, the project being on schedule and on budget, as I understood, pretty much on budget, because these things can be something of a slippery fish and get away from you. So that's really encouraging, and my thanks to the staff for that. Thank you very much.
So we've got to move and second to receive the report. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
All those again will say no. Carried. We'll now move to the 2009 item 7, the local government statement update. Who would like to run us through that?
Slippery fish.
So, this is a general housekeeping point that we need to update our website on some significant changes prior to the election period. So it sets out in the paper some of the things that we need to amend and update. It is really exactly that, just background housekeeping.
Mr Chair, I'm happy to move the report. It's very self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Moved.
Seconded.
Seconded, Councillor Belford. Any comment from anyone around this? Yes, Mr Puckett.
Just one was just in regards to the, one note in regards to the opportunity for the discussion around Māori wards or Māori seats. By reading this, am I to understand that that discussion is no longer available until 2023?
Yes.
I was under the impression that
That's your answer.
It's,
I understand it's 2023 is the next.
or earlier if it so chooses.
yes, yes, that's what my understanding as well. Perhaps some clarification
Yeah,
further.
look, my recollection is that to do it sooner necessarily involves a poll, whereas on the 6 yearly cycle you can do it and then a poll can be demanded. From memory, I think that's the distinction.
Yeah, I'll clarify that and make sure that you receive it.
Thank you.
All right. We've received the report, the local government statement update report. All those in favour of receiving the report will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. It's carried. We'll now move to financial delegations. It's on page 33, item 8. Have you taken through that, Manton?
Right, so this is a follow-on from a paper that we brought to the Finance Audit Risk Committee, and thought that it is worth another paper. We've took some advice at that point and have made some amendments to the proposed policy, and again, just as a full council, looking at some feedback and some guidance on on where we should go from here.
Any comment on this, Councillor Bailey?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Through you, Manton, one of the discussions we had at the all-powerful previous committee was around these delegations being quite clear that it was annual rather than just a number in there.
Okay.
That's not clear from that.
No.
Yep, I will make that
You
quite
could
clear.
turn up I can see here someone could turn up every day and authorise $200,000 worth of travel, $200,000 worth of this every day. Well, we'd be running out of money fast.
So some clarity, Chair. Is it per annum? And that's
Yeah, absolutely.
But no, that needs to be. We need to rewrite the resolution.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. The quantums are some of those are per transaction.
The transaction.
So we will make it perfectly clear if it hasn't already.
No, that just be absolutely clear, and I want to make it clear that we're not going to pass a resolution in the form it is here. I want the resolution is, it sets out in the resolution what we're actually passing, in the resolution.
So, in relation to, look, these are all in relation to individual transactions, and obviously where it's outside of what's in the annual plan, it's capped by the contingency provision.
But what's outside the annual plan? You've got no authority to spend anything outside the annual plan.
If we have a contingency provision, then there is the ability to draw down on it, and then the
That's
question,
right.
and then the question is whether or not all expenditure of the contingency provision is overseen by councillors, no matter how small it is, or whether you provide some ability for the chief executive to spend from the contingency without seeking approval, and that's what is proposed here. So the contingency provision is your cap, and then obviously the replacement reserve is a cap in the capital area.
But my view about that is that I would be more than happy for the chief executive to spend some money out of the contingency in consultation with the chair. The second thing is that these are large sums of money, and someone can spend $150,000 in any one commitment. Well, the moment someone goes and makes a commitment for $150,000, look at how much we spend it, how much we agonise over $10,000 in our budget. I thought there should be some reporting, some reflection back to council that I have X has approved $150,000 for a new, whatever it is. We should see that.
To give you an example in this space, Mr. Maxwell is currently signing out regularly grants for over $100,000 or close to $100,000 for farm plan implementation, so fencing and planting and what have you.
I want to do that.
And there has been an issue with some of that needing to come across my desk as well, and that's been excessive and bureaucracy in our view, because the funding, there's a fund, this policy's been set by council, the funding's been allocated, there's been approvals from staff level up already through layers of management for that, and you've got a landowner who's expecting the grant to be pulled down. So where it's within the annual plan, I don't see any great need to report upwards those approvals, because there's a lot of them across our total expenditure, particularly in the grants area.
Well, I'm just coming back to see, I've worked in another area, which you're familiar with, where you could go down to sums of $50,000, and we used to go and charge for that to see that down to sums that see what people were spending down to those levels to make sure that the expenditure was correct. And I also felt that because you went digging through the accounts, it meant the people who were spending the money knew you could look at it, and therefore were much more intent on making sure that it could withstand the scrutiny. So it's a check. At the moment we have,
sure,
and I'm not wanting to slow down your processes. Ian, I'm happy for him to write out checks $100,000 before every morning tea for these sorts of things. I make it 4 times a day. I'm happy for that. That's what we want done. But I do feel council should have some sight into the way in which this is going on, because it's beyond our ken at the moment.
Well, certainly the audit process does check that all of those approvals are within policy and the correct internal.
The audit process.
The internal.
Who are they?
Well, the annual auditor, the Audit New Zealand.
But councillors are. So we are the authority by which we get the money.
Sure, but that's why you employ an auditor to go through the accounts and make sure that the expenditure is aligned with.
But on the other side, this is a bit disjointed, that we approve the money, we get the stacks of money off by force, off ratepayers, that hands it away, and we never then quite see how it's spent ourselves. It's always done by someone else, like you, by delegation, by the auditor, whatever. We never actually see it, it just disappears over the horizon.
Well, Councillor, would you agree that under item 7 of the paper that it's clear where provision is made in the LTP, we seem to have it well spec'd? Is it the area around with no provision, that is diving into the contingency? Is that where your concern lies?
Well, just explain myself a little bit. I've run numerous organisations. I ran them very transparent. So every cheque I wrote was on a list. And then to every executive meeting I turned up, I presented them with a list of all the cheques. I had the authority to sign all the cheques, make all the payments, but I just wrote them all out, great list, pages of them, put them in front of them, and they could all see. So you're giving me authority to spend the money, I'd spend the money. Each cheque was numbered, the value, whom was spent, and I felt that was me just making sure that I was checking them, that I had carried out their task to the people who authorised it.
Well, I mean, we're talking about hundreds of transactions per week.
I get that, but I'm just saying these are large sums of money we're authorised here. For petty cash, you're doing the catering fee, I'm not really interested in that, all of that. So, but for large sums of money, I do think we should have, this is me personally,
Define a large sum.
Well, $200,000 here is a large sum, isn't it? I would have thought.
So your issue is around reporting as opposed to the delegation, is that
yes,
what
that's
you're
right.
saying? Okay.
I want the feedback loop closed somehow.
Resolve, isn't it?
Well, obviously within the financial reporting, such as in the report you saw earlier on, you're getting a breakdown per group and how that's tracking, which goes down to some relatively granular levels.
I'm sorry if I'd have been given the chance to get the finance auditor, I was going to have this conversation.
But if for individual transactions you want some kind of de minimis or something like that, by which all transactions over, let's say, $200,000 or whatever, or $100,000, is reported in a table, we can probably draw that out of the finance system relatively easily. But there will be a good number of them, and if it's funding which has been earmarked in the long-term plan for that purpose, we've got an audit process to ensure that it is being spent for that purpose. I'm not sure what value it's adding, other than giving you some visibility of sizable transactions occurring.
That's
Chairman,
I wonder.
is there an opportunity for anyone else to speak?
Well, we'll get to that. We'll just need to deal with that issue, but that's fine. I wonder whether we can. It occurs to me that the delegation process is fine here. There's no huge issue around that. It's simply that reporting. Is it possible for you to come back and at the council meeting where this is reported to say, here is a practical way of reporting the most significant expenditure items to deal with that, and whether that's reported to the Finance and Risk Committee, I don't know. But is that a way around this to satisfy?
So some type of list of transactions over and above 200,000 per quarter, just for visibility.
So you could include.
Why do we need it? If it's been budgeted,
Sorry,
if
Councillor.
it's in an annual plan, it's budgeted. Why do we need it? This is getting into the realm of.
Possibly
Well, I think you're right in terms of the annual plan, Councillor. Perhaps the contingencies, maybe.
Contingency, I've got issues with that. I'd like to know, I'd like it to be clear with the Chief Executive that 15,000, is that one-off or is that per item?
That's per item, but the contingency is in of itself capped.
Well, I believe the contingency belongs to council because it's to provide for events that haven't been anticipated, budgeted or provided for. And I'm happy enough with the CE being able to spend up 15,000 out of the paltry $100,000 contingency. But I think anything else should come to council because it's an exceptional item.
So that would mean modifying that delegation.
It would. So we just need some guidance from the committee.
Councillor Hill.
Yeah.
James, can you please explain to me, so for Jo, she has the ability to spend up to 200,000 for any one commitment. What would that one commitment, what could it look like?
So it would be typically a contract for example, we have a biosecurity contract to deliver some services, which is over the group manager level at 150, and it's simply to give her a little bit more flexibility to approve on my behalf higher transactions. But it's a relatively minor increment, probably from 150 to 200, based on, I guess, the
New role, so I presume there's no delegation anyway.
Yes, so there is the delegation at the moment is the same as other group managers.
Yeah, it's the thought behind that is the more, transactions that happen every month that are obviously budgeted. So we're thinking, Tourism Hawke's Bay, our Go Bus transactions, things like that don't really require too much, input from James. It's a constant thing. So that's trying to keep it off his desk and keep him a little bit more.
Keep it off our desk as well.
Exactly. So that was the thinking behind it.
Thank you. That's
All right, well, we've got
a good explanation.
Yeah, it's useful actually. It's drawn out what the actual transactions are. So we come back to it. Mr. Parker, do you want to?
Yeah. So just listening to this, I think it's not so much who has delegation, who has oversight is actually the actual real question. So if it's the CEO, who's oversighting what the CEO is signing off, and vice versa. So it's the oversight is really what you're wanting to see. It's not who has the delegation. These delegations are quite honestly pretty small. They are small. You'll be surprised what the Tai Whena's delegations look like compared to this. But it's not the size of the delegation that's the issue. It's who has oversight. So for the CEO, it is normally the chair and the board that has oversight over his delegations, and it drops down accordingly. Right. Each of them have their levels that they can go to, and it's all done through policy. It's the oversight, the audit.
At the end of the day, we're needing to ascribe delegations, and so a way forward, if in terms of the reporting, if you come back with what you think is a reasonable level of reporting for the most significant transactions, a comment on that, and we can make a call on that at council. But going to Councillor Dick's issue around delegations around the contingency, what do we want to set there? Staff are needing to have a definitive number.
Just a question on that, Chair. Would contingency also mean payment, expenditure, emergency expenditure, if there's a civil defence emergency or something like that? Or does that come out of another budget?
To Manton on this.
So that would be our disaster damage reserves, which again would revert back to, I'd expect that to come through council. I mean, it's an exception. It's a...
I was thinking more of, if we need to get helicopters to take people off roofs or something like that.
Right, so sorry, yeah, there is a provision for emergency management in that list of delegations there. So they've got 100,000 for any one event or any one transaction. Yeah, and
that one's slightly complex because there is a once we get to a declaration, there's a system that operates with the Ministry of Civil Defence and Emergency Management that effectively allows us to spend as required and fix all that up later.
It overrides all of it
between the Crown. The thing I'm sort of reflecting on here is the contingency one, and I've got two recent examples in mind. One is the water conservation order, and the other is the expenditure on the consultation on the port. Now, we came and have flagged in both cases with you the need to spend additionally, and we've sought approval for the additional spend, if you like, in totality. But the individual transactions that sit within that are not necessarily going to be drawn from contingency. They're going to drop to the bottom line, and they're not within the long-term plan. And I guess that would have probably, to be absolutely consistent with policy, would have required us to have brought forward, although in the case of the long-term plan we've had HBRIC as the intermediary, so that's been slightly different, but it would mean that each and every contract would require your approval for each provider of the services. The water conservation was a bit messy because we've funded that out of the budget for consultancy services for planning. So it's being pulled from the right place, but we just know that given the demands on there, we're going to overspend that area. So in essence, we're spending with the anticipation of being outside the long-term plan, but as the expenditure's been approved, it will still be within budget. So that's a little bit curly, that one. Where we've got a bucket for, say, consultancy services, and there's quite a number of those sorts of buckets across the organisation that provide some flexibility to respond to issues as they arise. And this is where this whole thing starts getting quite complicated, that if we get too specific on those sorts of things, we will be coming to you with an awful lot of approvals that will have significant time constraints, so we'll want decisions really quickly on expenditure of that nature.
Well, all you have to do, like the water conservation order, for example, is to indicate that it's likely that it'll be overspent, and the recommendation is that the overspend be funded from anticipated surplus, or, if it's your wish, from contingency. But let the council know. I mean, if you've got the, as I say, 100,000 contingency is most inadequate.
Agreed.
But it's there and it belongs to the council, in my view. If you're going to be able to dip in 15,000 a time, then we'll get to a point somewhere during the year where something comes up and we consider, well, we can fund that from contingency, and we find, in fact, there's no contingency left. So the Chief Executive has spent it all.
So, Councillor, that's precisely why the contingency is actually typically the last place we draw upon. So the first call goes to, can we find within existing budgets the room for it? And in relation to the water conservation order, that's precisely what we have done as per your suggestion. Where this gets complicated is when the invoice comes in from Wynne Williams, our lawyers on the water conservation order, if it triggers the 50,000, then I'm going to have to come to you for approval for payment of that invoice.
I think it's important not to confuse, though, James, the individual transaction delegation, which is one thing, and then the other thing is the exceedance of budget, which is another matter.
Yes.
So the question we come back to now for this paper is, are we comfortable with the delegations that are set out here, notwithstanding potential reporting obligations around it. So Councillor Dick, the issue arises with the contingency that the CE has up to $50,000 to spend. I'm not sure we got 15, but the chief executive could in fact blow the thing in 2 transactions. Based
Well, I
on
mean, for a
this.
start, we need to, this table needs to be updated,
33
Council,
nil.
to indicate when these are cumulative annual limits or per line item.
Well, it says for any one commitment, so
These are only for transactions.
We did try to keep that clear. Look, I've got no problem with a requirement from council that decisions in relation to the contingency spend be brought to council, either for approval or at least for visibility. That's no problem. I am left wondering about the middle ground in this, which is the example I just gave, where there is a deviation from the annual plan, but we're not drawing from the contingency, but there is a potential impact on the bottom line. Now, we always bring that to your attention and your approval in totality. What we don't then do is bring all the different transactions that sit under that to you for approval.
I think it's a different matter. I think we can come back to discuss that, but for this particular paper, we either go with or don't go with a single transaction delegation that is specified here.
I'm just thinking from a practical point of view, we essentially never touch that contingency until we reforecast it 9 months, and that's that combined conversation we have with council about, hey, this is how we're tracking certain areas, and it will be the conversation about the WCO, and it will be the port consultation will be a part of that. We'll find ways of, what's underspent, give you a bottom line and say, actually, we either don't or do need to tap into this contingency, and that's obviously your call. So if that's how it works operationally, then maybe we should take that contingency portion out, have the normal operating delegations, and then operationally we can track it.
So are you comfortable taking, for this purpose of this paper, the contingency section out and leave that, perhaps come back with a discussion on that, James, at some point?
That makes sense. And if
You're
it's a matter
comfortable with
that's
that?
resolved with the
Councillor Barker?
rebudgeting or the reforecasting, and that's transparent.
Councillor Wilson.
Council, that's
Well,
fine.
on that basis, Chair, I'm happy to move because 3.2 reviews and considers the proposed financial delegation, provides feedback for recommendations to council for decisions. So I think we've got a safeguard there.
Look, that would be good, Chair, and I think there is some work to do. The more I think about the port consultation, the fact we gave you a schedule of additional costs, you signed off on that, but then there were a whole bunch of checks that had to be written along the way, and if we're not careful, we're going to need approval for each and every one of those in such circumstances, and I don't know whether that's your desire.
I'm happy to move.
So
Chair.
we've got that moved, and it's a holding position somewhat, but Councillor Barker, you
I'll
want to
second
comment? Yeah, second that. Are you comfortable with that, committee? So we'll move on this. Councillor Dick will come back to another discussion around what you're saying.
But just in speaking to it, just to add the point that when it comes back, I know it's a holding position, but when it comes back, I want to see the resolution, not just have as the way it's written here. The resolution is that council delegates accordingly and sets out each of the positions and the delegation and the time framework, so it's clear what we're delegating. It's not clear from this, so when someone goes back later and looks at it, can see precisely what council will in one place, not have to refer back through the paper.
Anthony, you all right with that? Okay, we've got a move in a second. Any other comment? Councillor Bay? All those in favour? Oh, sorry, I didn't give Councillor Wilson his right of...
I sort of semi-related. I was very interested in Councillor Barker's rendition of all the checks he wrote. He'd put them on a list, and I think that level of reporting for drinking at the Hari Hari pub to her indoors is to be commended.
There'll be no further comment on that. All those in favour of that direction will say aye. Those against will say no. We're over time and we need to move quickly to agenda item 10, which is the matters arising from the Audit New Zealand long-term plan audit. and I'm assuming you've read that. That's in a separate attachment.
Yes.
And it gives us an overview of the whole Western world's approach to planning and audit. Are there any comments from staff on this?
Happy to move the
It was really an information paper. Stephen Lucy, our audit director, sent the OAG, our Audit New Zealand report to Councillor Curtin and I, and we thought it was a good idea to share the recommendations and the views of the report with the committee. There are obviously a number of headlines and consistency across the country in terms of long-term plan issues and approach, and I think they clearly outlined in the paper. In addition, we attached a project review of the long-term plan process, which Councillor Barker had mentioned at our last council meeting that we were due to report back, so we thought it was timely to attach it to this report in conjunction with looking at the findings. Happy to take any questions.
Chair, can I just draw Council's attention to the appendix number 6 in the OAG report, which refers to the regional council's forecasts, and I think what's interesting in that is the overall difference between the 2015 to 25 LTPs and 2018 to 28. You'll see in there that across the board there was a 25% increase during that 3-year period forecast across the LTPs in rates revenue, 19% revenue overall, and in terms of employee costs, a 27% increase. So, and there are a range of other metrics in there which suggests that the overall increase in expenditure and revenue by this council is somewhat commensurate with what's happening across the sector nationally.
All right, so we've got the report, and I'm sure you've had read that from cover to cover. So can I have a mover, please?
All right, some
Oh, you have
questions.
a question on Councillor
Okay,
Bailey?
2 questions. On page 58, this is attachment 2. We have a table. Just like to say, I really appreciate this coming back, and I appreciate also that it's kind of written for internal use rather than.
Yes, so it was an internal piece of work, but we thought that it was appropriate to share findings.
Which is really cool.
Yep.
So what didn't go so well on that table on page 58, which is page 6 of the actual thing, too much going on, complexity, so on, and presentations material on the day that I hadn't seen it before. What I was curious to know, was there anything that we can do as a council to, at the front end of the process, to make sure that, to make it easy for you guys in terms of at the back end, in terms of timing?
I think that was really in recognition that it was expressed quite strongly from councillors that they didn't appreciate being presented material at a workshop without having an opportunity to pre-read. So I think internally as staff we've taken that on board, and we've really made attempts to make sure that we provide you with sufficient briefing papers.
Yep, no, that's cool. And my second question is the next bit of that table that comes down about writing to every ratepayer generated a lot of irate phone calls and drop-ins.
Yep.
Was that to do with was that more to do with the issue of how we sent out letters to the database and we only captured one of the ratepayers and not both of them, more than anything else?
And also a number of ratepayers received multiple numbers of letters, so ratepayers who own a number of properties.
Yep.
So that was just in terms, and it was interesting that actually through this review we had concluded that possibly a letterbox drop would have been a more appropriate method. So obviously this was conducted before we had the port consultation. So I think that's work internally that we're looking at our process around contacting the community and what the best way to do that is. So
yeah, okay.
That was in regards to because the length of the letter we had used one name as opposed to both names.
Yep,
that's right.
That's right. I thought it was that.
Any other questions on the project review and closure documentation there that Desiree's produced, other than the changing the dates there to 18-19? You'll note that at the top.
Just a comment.
Mr. Walker.
Yeah, in regard to page 63.
63.
With the final end of it. There's a statement there about how I declined to write a forward to demonstrate co-governance. I just refused to tick the box on reinforcing some status quo issues that tangata whenua weren't happy with. And also it says we set an expectation up front of greater involvement. Well, I think there was a mutual expectation.
It is an opportunity that would encourage you to take whenever it's available, but that's your prerogative.
Yeah, yeah. But you know, given the long-term plan, process wasn't one we were happy with, I just declined from being party to it, that's all.
Sure. Yeah, and we take accountability. I think the project team, we have talked in detail about we certainly need to engage earlier in terms of what the best way to communicate is, so we'll attempt to do that better going forward.
Any other issues raised out of that report? I'm happy to move. Seconded, Councillor Barker. Just a brief comment from myself. Thank you to staff, particularly Desiree, for the process. This is good process to go and review what we did and try and learn something from it and move forward. And clearly we did pick up some knowledge, and that's a good thing. So it's been moved and seconded. Any other comment, Councillor Barker?
I concur with your comments.
Any other comment? It's been moved to receive that report. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. It's carried. We'll move on to Health and Safety Work Programme. That's agenda item 12 on page 103.
Mr. Bull with us today to talk to the paper.
Good morning, councillors. Tēnā kora Mike Toro. I guess the two main points that I would like to reinforce coming out of there, and my apologies through the report and through a couple of the documents for Americanising title of your roles as a first point. The draft Health and Safety Charter, which was one of the recommendations for councillors that came out of the audit report, and the opportunity for councillors to spend some time in the field looking at some of the work activities to get a better understanding of some of the risks are just two of the main points coming out of that. Two other documents are also attached are the implementation plan, which is basically setting out how we want to address the recommendations from the audit report, and the other document is a draft strategic plan, which is also one of the recommendations from the audit report. So look, just happy to take any recommendation or any questions and any consideration of those two particular points which affect the council. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I for one, as a new councillor, would have welcomed the governance charter at the start of my career here, or my role here. But just one question, the top bullet point on page 112, I suppose it's not so much a question, but it's something that will concern me about it, is this personal commitment to attaining a thorough understanding of the day-to-day risks faced by employees and contractors. I just want to, at some point, have it fleshed out, because I don't want to be interfering in the delegation we've given to James about managing all those the day-to-day operations of the staff, and it worries me that we've basically been asked to step in and do a real nuts and bolts of it, and it seems to me we might be treading on some toes there, so I don't want to do that.
Thanks. Thank you. Councillor Barker?
I've got quite a few comments to make on the text.
Please give them comments.
Right. State of the Health and Safety Implementation Plan 2019. First paragraph. Significant inroads. I just wondered what this... The point I want to make here is language is important to me. The words we use indicate what it is. And I found in some of the stuff here that the language is more than necessary. I would put some of it as a bit puffy rather than substance. So inroads, step changes. Are we so bad that we've got to have step changes to make big changes? I would have thought that we should be relatively proud of our record and looking to make cost incremental improvements. To the vision, our vision of Hawke's Bay Regional Council to actively ensure that everyone, take out actively, ensure that everyone goes home safe after every day, and others in local government use this as a benchmark. Benchmark to be better than us, worse than us. I just I didn't get that. I just think you need to rework that. Our beliefs go on to other things. Over the road, page and the third bullet point, ensure our health and safety objectives has equal status with other business objectives. I didn't agree with that. We make compromises on financial, make compromises on all sorts of things. Are we going to make compromises on health and safety? I'd have thought health and safety will be our primary concern above all else. Everything must be safe first. That's a preeminent position. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 provide opportunities for managers, including senior managers, to be upskilled in health and safety management. What about the workers? Is this going to be an elitist organisation? Surely it should be for everybody. That's my view. The next bullet point down, evaluate Hawke's Bay Regional Council's performance regularly, correcting deficiencies should arise. So that we've got here continuous improvement changes, which I think is correct, and I contrast that with the word step changes before. So I just think that's the right formulation. We always want to be there's no end state for this, we should be saying. We want to always be constantly improving. Comply with relevant health and safety requirements. Well, we should do. We should obey the law. Maintain rehabilitation, but that's fair enough. The second to last problem bullet point here, I didn't think was an ACC work health and safety thing. It's more of a general good employer. We should have rehabilitation for everybody. You with me? I wondered. It seemed to me it was in the wrong place. Then moving on to the next document, your appendix. Activity ownership. This sounds like a phrase that comes out of northeastern American universities. I like terms which are solid there for 30 years, be 30 years. So activity should be responsibility. So who's responsible, and where a person's responsible, who's accountable? See, responsibility and accountability are really powerful terms. Ownership, who owns things? And so I went through that. Health and Safety Governance Charter. Moving to point 1, purpose. The third paragraph, Council has a core governance role. No, it has a governance role. We don't have core, central, peripheral roles. It's a governance role. It requires leadership, doesn't need strong. Proactive oversight, what's that? It's just oversight. The vision, our vision is for Hawke's Bay Regional Council to be benchmark health and safety activities. That's an activity, not a vision. What's our vision? Vision is not an activity. I just thought a few other things I could go. But to get my thing, I just think it was. What I'm looking for here is solid, immovable, old-fashioned language which would stand the test of time, and to have not activities, but if we're going to have a vision, let's have a vision. What does we want? I thought your line said everybody goes home at the end of the day, safe. Great. I think it's perfect, And we must not compromise on that. Everybody must be engaged. It's the core of what we do. Nothing happens until we give this safe. I agree with that. Solid, dependable language.
Thank you, Councillor Marcus. Some really
I read it.
really significant insights.
Yeah, thank you.
Viv, have you got any response to that?
No, look, I really appreciate that feedback, and we'll certainly go through it on that basis. It was a sort of a joint work with the consultant, so maybe their terminology crept in there a little bit too much, and we'll certainly have a look at that. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with old-fashioned.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor Wilson, I'll come back to you.
Oh, no.
Okay, Mr. Parker.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Just on the same lines as Councillor Barker, it's basically just in the first page there, our beliefs. I think it's just a bit more than making sure people get home safe. It's actually about providing a health and safety environment, because as you will know, mental health is also an important part of that. So I just think to be expanded on that a bit more. I think it was more focused around preventing accidents. I think it just needs to be a bit more expansive.
Councillor Wilson.
So just very briefly, Chair, reading all this stuff, I'm trying to tie it back to the fact we still had 9 incidents in January. I'm not seeing where the rubber's going to hit the road and our incident chart diminishes incredibly. So I'm just wondering whether it would be worthwhile, without spending a small fortune, within the delegations, to get someone to have an external party to have a look at this, and just make sure that, I mean, it's been very well articulated. A lot of the language is sort of the old-fashioned way of doing stuff, but actually there's some quite smart ways to keep people safe now, and I just think we need to be a bit more serious in how we attempt that. So while the recrafting is valid, and in fact some of the points I'm trying to say now were articulated by Councillor Barker, a clear, concise methodology to get 9 incidents in January seriously reduced, if not eliminated. That should be our goal. So I'm not sure where you take that, Chair, but I'm putting it on the table.
Obviously, this report has come about as a result of having an independent audit undertaken of our health and safety program by Crowe Horvath. And then following that, we have used an independent consultant to provide some advice about how to respond to the findings of that audit. So this is an area of ongoing focus, and we now have work underway to scope up what additionally we need by way of resourcing and systems and processes internally to deal with the issue. I don't want to diminish the 9 in January, but and obviously we do have a view that all incidents are preventable, but avoiding wasp stings in summer may be something that we never get to zero, just by nature of, we can't control wasps. But I take the point that we can do better, and certainly the view of the executive team is that we can and must. So that the work program is designed to support that. I'm not sure that at this point we need any more independent advice. We just need to get on with.
Well, we'll get on with it, but I'm just saying the figures are unacceptable, James.
Understood. And we've had that conversation, and we have particularly focused on your commentary in that regard. So we're aware of those concerns.
Right. Well, let's. The question I've got for you, Viv, is there's a significant rethinking or redrafting to take place. Have you got sufficient time between now and council to do that, or do you want to defer till a further round? What's your pick? Can you do it in time? When's council? 27th. So you've got 2 weeks to do that.
We can do that.
Yeah. So 2 weeks is enough time to redraft. Councillor Hewitt.
If you're seeking feedback on councillors getting out on the field and hands-on, and I think that's really important from a governance perspective. So just to signal if there is something you want to arrange, then I'm available.
Okay, thank you.
Can I, other matters, just check, Chair, that the committee is comfortable with the Health and Safety Governance Charter being signed by both the Chair of the Audit and Risk Committee and the Chair of the Council, presented to Council for ratification on that basis?
Yes.
Updated?
Yes.
And you'll take on board the comments from Mike, Mr. Parker?
Yeah.
So happy with that?
I'm happy to move, Chair.
Wilson's moved, and
I'll second.
Councillor Barker seconded. So we've any comment, Councillor Wilson?
Oh, just briefly, Chair. I mean, I don't want to bang on about this stuff, but the figures, they need to improve. It's as simple as that. We can't just say, "Oh, there's wasps up there, get over it." It's a fact of life. We live in a dynamic and disruptive workplace generally, certainly when you get into rivers, and the wasps have been particularly bad this year, certainly up north. So I get that stuff. I'm just saying that I just want to have a really clear connection of what's happening here to a noticeable improvement in workplace safety. Yeah. And it's as simple as that. It's not negotiable. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to bang on about it, and I don't want to get on Viv's case, either Mr. Moore's case, but I think you've got the message.
I think about the report, they did focus, just as you're saying, and getting the numbers down, they put it on their board and got a result. So,
thank you.
Chair, can I just register one thing in particular that I think is important in this context, is that a very large proportion of our operational health and safety risks reside with our asset management group, including Works, and the new group manager in this area did spend 4 years leading health and safety reform at Western Australia Water Corporation, which has a workforce vastly greater than all of the councils of Hawke's Bay combined, and was successful in halving their health and safety incidents during his tenure there. So, and has a particular set of skills and passion, so he will be driving this hard.
Councillor Hewitt.
Just on the WASPs, just to add, I mean, maybe it's just a sting, but actually those are public spaces that we're responsible for. So if we're having our staff getting stung, then it's quite likely that members of the public are too. So this responsibility widens more than just one sting, and I endorse everything that Councillor Wilson's saying in terms of, you know, zero harm is the best outcome.
Mr. Paku? Sorry, Mr. Waka.
Yeah, just in terms of our culture, I suppose, you know, I understand there are wider aspects in terms of culture, in terms of health and safety. So I understand there was a staff member who didn't want to come to the RPC meetings because of not feeling comfortable, and so I mean, there probably, you know, in terms of emotional intelligence stuff within our staff, there probably needs to be that area needs to be looked at right across the board. And given we do have issues in terms of staff recruitment, we, in our exit interviews, we need to be saying, do you feel safe in this environment, or are you being persecuted by a psychology of fear, or, you know, to leave or in your work? So.
Look, I note there's a challenge with any public organisation that has elected members interfacing with staff. There are often discussions between elected members and staff which has a character to it, and perhaps a tone to it, which you would normally not see as either best practice or acceptable in terms of the way a manager within a staff within an operational environment would talk to their own staff, particularly around the performance of a piece of work or something like that. It can be pretty robust, and so we tend to try to provide our support to our staff in terms of resilience in the face of that. But I would note that from my point of view, responsible for the health and safety of staff, that is an enduring challenge, because we do set one set of standards for the management of the organisation about how they provide criticism and how they provide feedback to staff, and do that in a way which is positive and constructive. And then, you know, people do find the robustness of this environment challenging, and they don't necessarily see that as a natural part of coming to work today, every day in an organisation such as this.
Councillor Barker, did you want to comment?
Just a couple of points to make. Firstly, with respect to the points raised by Councillor Wilson, yes, we should aim for zero, but our quest for zero needs to be leavened with some reality. Living is a risk, getting out of bed is a risk, staying in bed is a risk. We humans have no risk-free environment. It's as simple as that. What the challenge for us is to minimise those risks, and so I'm on his side to a degree that we need to minimise it, but we cannot be overzealous on it, because zero is impossible.
Thank you for that. Councillor Wilson, you want to close? Yeah.
Nothing further.
Right, look, we've got a recommendation to Council to receive this report, obviously subject to a significant rewrite and going to counselling to overcome the so it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Those against will say no. That's carried. All right, we've got the final item is the minor item not on the agenda.
Just very briefly, Chair, the East Coast Farming Innovation Expo is on today, tomorrow. I think councillors and committee members have access to tickets, or should have tickets. Tomorrow, the agenda is focusing on hill country planting. Our people are there, MPI are there. Should be a good day. It'll be worth attending.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're all welcome in Wairau. Simple as that.
No other items that people...
Chair, I suggest that we get lunch underway as soon as we possibly can. Just have to see whether it's ready, and we can certainly start the workshop immediately after lunch.
Straight away. So you're happy with that? We look to, say, 12:30, 25 to 1 to get going with the workshop.
And the workshop's going to be chaired by the deputy chair.
So we're all done and dusted here, so meeting's closed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.